Welcome to the Convergent Science and Instrument Forum podcast on collaboration. I'm Paul Verschuur, and together with my colleague Bhavani Rao, we speak with Swami Shantamritananda Puri, a Brahmachari monk at the Mata Amritananda Maya Center in Chicago. From his engagement in social, education, and spiritual activities worldwide, Swami Puri shares his perspectives on collaboration, how it differs from collaboration, elements and intangibles that are involved, and how it is interwoven in most aspects of life. Welcome, Shanta, to our podcast.
Thank you.
That you could join us. And now, so before we really delve into the substance of around collaboration, it would be helpful that maybe you give a little sketch of your life trajectory that brought you to where you are today as Swami Shantamritananda Puri.
Yes, okay. It really started in college because I was focused on the humanities, and it was more philosophy and religion, but my focus was on Asia, including Japanese. But what happened is at the end of those 4 years, I became very inspired by the classical concept of justice as being like the ideal perfection in human relationships. So what that did is that took me to apply for officer candidate school in the armed forces because I wanted to protect justice. That was my concept. I was accepted, but then I ended up taking a offer to work for the Japanese government in a rural fishing village because I spoke the language. And there I learned a lot about international collaboration, intercultural, interlingual collaboration, which really taught me quite a bit. And after some time, though, I found myself being pulled towards my deeper roots. And that would be my roots in like philosophy and religion. So I think I was about 25 when I joined a traditional ashram in South India and began a new life in a hut on the Arabian Sea. And that ashram ended up blossoming into a worldwide humanitarian mission. And we have people collaborating with us in every country of the world practically. But I started off by training as a novice monk, and I lived there for 10 years before I was sent somewhere. And during those 10 years, I became very involved in a variety of collaborative projects. The first one was the construction of a 1,500-bed hospital and a project to build 100,000 houses for the underserved people. And then I was dispatched to Tokyo for 10 years, and that was where I got involved in our projects in Kenya, the disaster relief in Japan and in the Philippines, a public health project in Papua New Guinea, and a lot of interfaith activities with the Buddhist community. And the most recent decade has landed me in Chicago area, where I've been involved in a lot of collaborations in the fields of like youth activity and the environment, online education, and scientific research. So these have all become my duties as part of that massive humanitarian organization.
Mm-hmm. And currently, where are you located?
Oh, sorry, my Bluetooth is not working. Hang on, I'm going to turn it off.
Okay.
Yeah. Please say that again.
No, so I was just asking where you're located now, today.
At the moment, I'm in India.
Okay, good. Okay, but the home base for your work is now Chicago.
Chicago, and that's where a scientific research center is going to start soon.
Okay, great. So, well, thank you very much for that summary. So to open up, so what is collaboration and what is it good for?
I was asking myself the same thing. I was thinking, I'm not qualified to offer a definition, but it was funny because when this invitation came along, I asked myself that what is it, and because it didn't you know initially evoke an immediate image, but then I gave it a little thought, and it seems to me it's similar to cooperation, but feels different. It's not quite the same, and I knew that much. And but what I can say, what cooperation feels like, and what collaboration looks like to me. So for me, cooperation is like there's one guy doing a task, and if you give him 3 more people, then the task can be done in 1/4 of the time. That's what cooperation seems to feel like to me. Whereas collaboration feels really different. It's like through that collaboration, we become stronger, and we're well rounded. We have more talents. We have more resources, human or otherwise, and so we become more adaptable to the circumstances. And that those resources that are brought in by the participants, I feel that they yield more intangible benefits that wouldn't have been achieved otherwise. And that's basically my uninitiated sense of the concept. But when I looked at the concept of collaboration even more, I came to the conclusion that basically my whole adult life has been a conglomeration of various collaborations, and if we include these intangible goals and rewards, we could even say that everybody's life is kind of compromised by variegated and overlapping collaborations. And the whole world, it was from a holistic perspective, I felt like it was very difficult to come up with an example that doesn't qualify as a collaboration of some kind.
Mm-hmm. But now, what are these intangibles? What are the
intangibles? The intangibles that I'm thinking of are one would be intangible in the sense of you cannot detect it with your 5 senses. So it would be like personal growth. It would be trust. It would be deeper understanding about other cultures and yourself, and a lot of other such experiences, but you can't quantify them so easily.
Mm-hmm.
Not like revenue or promotions or something like that.
But now, so you've been involved in a number of really big projects that have collaborative aspects. But could you maybe take 1 or 2 examples where you say, look, it's by virtue of these following features that these projects as large-scale collaboration succeeded?
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I've been fortunate in a lot of ways that most of the people that I collaborate with share some similar values, I guess you could say. And in general, we all felt that these intangible results and goals were important. So, and we tend to give, or I do at least, give as much importance to those intangibles than the compared with the physical or concrete results. So I'll give you a few examples. That 100,000 house building project. I found that I learned how to be sensitive to the subtle cues that people are giving when they don't feel happy with their experience. And then we can adapt that project and what we're doing every day to take that into consideration. Initially, I didn't quite get it. I wasn't sensitive enough to people's exhaustion or their cultural reactions and the culture shock. But over time, I learned a lot more about that and how to understand people's emotional state based on some external cues. And also, I learned the importance of having
a big heart. And the more people we have that have big hearts, the better the project does.
But that's still, but can you can you make that a bit more tangible for us who weren't there in your project, right?
Sure. Yeah. So what I would say is when these intangibles are very striking, then we get more people to participate the following year. You know, like if, for example, we listen to them, and we don't judge them. They're really here for. Some people come with the intention of just trying to get a job and have put it on their resume, so when they go back to Japan or wherever it is, they have a better CV or a bio. But my goal is to have them have a really profound experience when they join this, for example, the housing project, and so that they can learn more, not just about other cultures, but about themselves. And then so when they go back, yeah, it looks good on the bio, but also it changes their life. And they will tell other people, and other people will come, and we will have more participation, more transformation. So these, to me, it's hard to quantify that, because, you know, the reason why it increases is not due to like advertising or we invested more money. It's because somebody was inspired by participating and they influenced other people.
But no,
I have a I have a question. So you think that this kind of transformation could not have happened without collaboration? Because you said, I mean, what if there was no collaboration? Maybe there was an individual that were actually going into the field and not a bunch of people. So I'm just wondering, how do you these things about being sensitive to whether somebody is happy or not, being the intangibles that you had mentioned, is it can you not pick them up without collaboration? Or how do
you can. Of course you can. I mean, that would be more of, but depends on how sensitive that person is and how sincere they are about how much focus they have on those in the first place. But I think a lot of people learn about it through the collaboration, because it stimulates different parts of their individuality when they interact with people who are different from them and who have different values. But there's always a coalescence of some of those values. And so once you realize this person is also just as sincere as you are, then you can say, wow, I'm wondering why he or she values such and so important, so much. I want to understand that better. So I feel that collaborative effort really opens our eyes to deeper levels of our own self too.
Yeah, but Shant, I'm confused about this still. I'm sorry.
Sure.
But
no problem.
What is really interesting now, collaboration, as you described it also earlier, means that you have a bunch of individuals who also coalesce around a common goal, right?
Yeah.
But now what you're describing is the trajectory of a single individual to be pulled into that process, because there's self-interest to be pulled in, like my CV will look better. And in some sense, I could even argue that the coordinator of the collaborative process has it's their own interest of opening their mind to a broader perspective on reality. But we're still not talking about collaboration now, because this is how tens or hundreds or thousands of people together in space and time in some way achieve that common goal. And I have not understood yet how you then manage that part of the project to actually build your thousands of houses.
Right. So could you just you're talking about the logistics of it or the strategy behind it, or?
Yeah, well, in the end, look, you have, I don't know, tens, hundreds of people working together at any point in time in that project, right?
Yes.
Okay, how do you keep them working together in that to achieve that common goal of building these houses? And of course, then meta level, you can of course say, yeah, but building the houses is more like a metaphorical act to come to a deeper in. But I would like to unpack that better.
Sure. Well, I mean, that is a little more of the we could call it the sort of the logistics of it, and how we put together the teams and actually do that. Is that an example of what you're looking for?
Well, yeah, I would like to understand how you have these hundreds of people working together
Yeah. Okay.
in that
Okay.
context.
Yeah. Well, one thing is definitely trust is a big factor because I'm not involved in all the dozens of countries that the people are coming from. So we're assuming that we have guidelines to bring the people over. So that part I don't really get involved in, but we trust that there's somebody who is coordinating it on that side. But before all the people come, someone like myself or another person will go there and make sure everything is prepared and that it's going to be, can say, not a
Swami, I think maybe he's looking for more in the direction like once the students from Japan are actually there on the ground, how do you actually get them involved and working on the project
Right.
with others, like with the
Okay.
Indians? How do
Yes,
you
yes.
work?
That's where a lot of language issues come in because especially Japanese people, they don't speak even English. So I translate, other people translate, and we divide them up into crews of about 10, depending on the site and depending on how many tools we have. And then there's no transportation. So they have to walk, and I walk to like 5 to 10 work sites. And then I'm constantly running around, checking in on them. So did the mason arrive when he said he did? Because if he doesn't arrive, they're just sitting there and doing nothing because they've got the tools and everything, but they don't know how to lay bricks. So you have to go, and sometimes the person who is in the house, they want to communicate something to the people. And if they can do that, it will make them, the participants, overjoyed, and it'll give them a great experience. And then they resume the work. So there's always something we have to be constantly visiting every work site so that we make sure that people are able to do the work that they came to do, the tangible work, and also have a good experience so that they can communicate with those people and feel the impact that they're making and learning why these. And for the people on the recipient side or the beneficiaries, they also want to understand why these college students came from all the way from Japan with their hard-earned money that they earned, they worked a part-time job. And so why have they done that? And there has to be both the physical part of providing them with the tools and help they need to build something, as well as I guess you could say, the tools to have a good experience.
But now, so in a sort of minimal interpretation, you could say, well, look, we take a bunch of people with good intentions, right? Yeah. And we just put them together, and by virtue of the good intentions, things will sort of work out because you give them the tools and the bricks and something will happen.
Yeah.
But I would assume that there's an additional coordination on top of that.
Yes.
I don't necessarily mean like top-down direction, but there must be additional, especially to deal with intangibles of the process, right? There must be, let's say, communication, information,
yes,
playing a structuring role. Could you explain that?
Sure. So one thing you said made me want to fill in a little blank that I left there, is that structurally we have people, making sure that these houses are not going to fall over tomorrow. They make sure that the roof is done properly with the concrete and all that. There are people who are watching that. But in terms of the rest of it, basically someone like myself is making sure that all those things take place.
Mm-hmm. Does this always work out, or does it sometimes also fail, this process?
It fails sometimes. I have a few examples.
Okay.
See, it's often due to lack of communication between two coordinators on our side or their side, the people who are coming from foreign countries. And one case, we were doing it on an island that had no vehicles on it anywhere, and it was very remote. And the only way to get the raw materials there was by boat. with like those Venetian boats, which you punt, with the long, and for miles and miles. And it was really tiresome. And the Japanese college students that year, they had just unloaded a bunch of boats and they were totally exhausted. But this one other coordinator from the project, who was a little senior to me, he insisted that they wake up, in the middle of the night and go and do it again. And then I knew at that point that it was not going to work. These guys are just going to say, not going to like it at all. And but then I said, if anybody wants to come, they're welcome to come. And I said, I'm going to load the boat and unload it. And if anybody wants to join me, they can. And a few people came, but it left a very sour taste in their mouth. And they didn't come the next year, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So it took a year for them to recuperate from that.
But so intangibles, in the end, have to be constructed, right? So we have to, in our mind, assign a label or a construct or a process to, or a value, right? A rule to an intangible. So, and as you mentioned trust. So how do you manage trust then in this situation? Like in the case also of these students who might feel in some sense abused, right? So how is trust?
Or maybe, sure, they probably felt a little bit vulnerable and not, probably I should have protected them a little bit more, because I'm the protector from outside influences. Yeah. But really, they've, over the next few years of our collaboration with them, and this is not just the housing project, other projects as well, we build up that trust through our own actions. That's what I feel is most important. We see that people are ready to make some kind of sacrifice of their own to further this noble project, whatever it may be, and then we share that same value, and also showing some humility, showing some flexibility, some maturity. All of these qualities go towards us really trusting the character of that person, and then say, look, I trust you fully. At one point, we can just say, whatever you say, we're going to go with that. And then they say, okay, on your side, you take care of all that. We trust you.
But now, do you see a trade-off here between trust, which is in some sense also given, right? And the need to explain objectives? Because you could say the more trust you lose in the situation, the more in some you have to cajole your participants by explaining why this is all very relevant and important. Do you see a trade-off there?
Could you say a little bit one more time? I'm trying to understand what the
trust and goals, right? So for instance, if someone loses trust in leadership,
right,
then leadership could respond by saying, oh, I will explain in more detail why this is super important for the whole world and everybody, and you included. Right. Therefore, you should follow my lead. Right. If I trust the leader or the coordinator blindly, you don't need to tell me anything about planning on doing, because I'll just follow you. Right. So do you see there also a trade-off between goals, explanation, and trust in the process?
Yes, there. I, as a leader of sorts, I've learned to ask a lot of questions before I ask them to follow me. I need to know what their limitations are, what their goals are, and all that. Make sure that I can help them achieve those. And they ask me a lot of questions also. So I think clarifying those goals ahead of time is really, really important. And then after that, once we're in the thick of it, it's a lot of just, you could call it blind trust, but there's also every night, another thing I should point out, every night we have meetings about how the day's work went. And then even the students, everybody participates in groups. And then we talk about how it went. Was it successful? What didn't work? And then if it didn't work, then the next day we don't do it. We don't wait for the whole project to end.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So that also means there's a collective, if you want, interpretation and meaning generation stage.
Yes.
Would that be a good way to describe it?
Yeah, I mean, the meaning, what they learned from that day, we tend to look at it sooner than later, so we understand what did we learn, and then we can leverage that for the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And also funny stories, and it's a time to kind of relax and get out of your head and get out of that exertion, and then just sit and reflect without any judgment. And so I find it's very helpful for us, any collaboration.
Mm-hmm. Right. But then how many people have gone through this process?
Thousands.
Uh-huh. Right.
Just the housing project alone. I mean, there's somehow I got engrossed in that topic, but there's a lot of other examples.
Right. And how many
different complex one? That's why.
But how many different cultures?
For the housing project, or
yeah. Let's start with housing and then in general.
Okay, so the first few projects alone in the housing were each time about 10 to 15 countries.
Mm-hmm.
And we got up to about 20 countries. And I think our biggest group was about 200 people at once.
Mm-hmm.
And this was another challenging one. They landed in Ahmedabad the day that the Godra incident took place. Are you familiar with that?
The Godra incident, do you know about that, Paul?
Please explain.
This was when it is a very controversial thing. This is when a train got burnt out that was having Hindu pilgrims supported by the Muslims. And then the Hindus attacked the Muslims in the state of Gujarat, and thousands were killed in civil unrest. I mean, they were lynched, and it was it was a bloodbath. And it was a communal fight between the Hindus and the Muslims in the state of Gujarat. Very, 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 very difficult time.
And that took place as the Japanese students and other people from around the world were on the airplanes to land right in ground zero. So we hid for 3 days in the city, and then we drove to that place where we were building the houses. And even it was scary in the beginning, but what happened, everybody wanted to come. Mm-hmm. They said, even if you had told me before we got on the airplane, we still wanted to come.
Right.
And then very hard work, but they bonded with the local people, and they learned a traditional dance. And then actually when the governor of the state came, who was now the prime minister, before him and Amma, who's our inspiration, about 150 students were doing a traditional dance in the traditional dress. And that was the thing that made them so happy.
Mm-hmm. Right. Because what I want to get to is individual difference and cultural difference. Right. Yeah. So that's why I want to look a little bit at the number of. So in this whole process that you now describe, are there how many, if you want, individual failures are there that people just drop out of the process? They cannot keep up. They cannot adhere. What's your dropout rate?
Not so high, actually. There was one woman who came after the tsunami in 2004. She came for rebuilding houses in the southeast of India, where the tidal wave hit, the tsunami hit. And she came to the site once, and then she just never came again. And it was too hot for her. And I didn't know, but she was actually what do you say? She had a psychological problem that she didn't notify us about, and she wasn't taking her medicine. So
that might not help. Right.
Sorry?
That might not help.
Yeah.
Right.
And there are some problems like that, but usually, another problem I'll tell you, sharing a failure, is that in Pune one year, I didn't pay enough attention to the kitchen conditions, and dozens of people got food poisoning.
Mm-hmm.
And every day we were taking 3 or 4 people to the hospital for IV, but some of those same people came again. They really like it.
Right. No,
Not food poisoning.
but that's interesting, right? Because it shows that there's a generic process here that seems to work, But now, do you see any cultural differences there? Because you have people from dozens of different countries.
Oh yeah.
Does that affect the process?
It makes it more complex for sure. And I and the others who are helping make it go forward either from the foreign side or from the local side. Mm-hmm. We all understand that we have to make some adjustments of our own and without burdening other people. And we have to sometimes talk individually with people who are having a problem, sometimes having a big group discussion about certain factors that need to be addressed, whether it's a foreign issue or a domestic issue. And so there's sacrifice, I would say, is involved to make things right, because it means you have to spend more energy, more time, and sometimes, it's really hard to be one of the leaders because you don't get a lot of sleep. You sometimes don't get food and you're walking long distances and it's over 30 degrees Celsius.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, yeah, it's really...
But without wanting to tempt you to let's say, make racial stereotypes or cultural stereotypes, what are the main dimensions on which you see this variability? You could, for instance, imagine that people from certain cultures have not really been trained in speaking up, while in other cultures they speak up too much. So what are the main dimensions you see there in these cultural differences in the context of collaboration?
It depends on where I am, because I've done it in so many countries that I basically go by the culture of that country, because it's the safest way I find. Because look, we're doing it here in Australia or Fiji or Papua New Guinea. This is their country. Well, let's all try to adapt to their culture. And then it's easier to get people to collaborate in that, because they realize that, well, no, this is not US, this is not France, it's not UK or something like that. So it makes more sense. And that then also requires that I have to understand that culture, or whoever else is coordinating. Like in Papua New Guinea, I had the country director for the Clinton Health Access Initiative. And he was very helpful in bridging that gap. Mm-hmm. So I was a newcomer to that country.
So you give me the solution, right? Because in some sense you're saying, well, we built in a reference, a cultural reference, and that's where we are. That's the host culture.
Yeah.
But the first question is, what is the variability across the different cultures that you have identified? Because apparently you need to ground it, right? You need to put a reference in order to overcome.
Right. Yeah. I find that, it's somewhat due to the, nation of origin of that person. But I find it's kind of more personality, really. There are very fastidious Indians, and there are very, there are some careless Japanese people, but not as many as there are, I would say, like careless Americans, because I'm from America.
And so I have a question that kind of rides off on that question, because I was going to ask you if I could just interrupt. So I know a lot of the talk has been about goals, right? Common goals and things like that. But I was just wondering, and it's kind of related to what Paul just asked you. You have one common goal, like say building a house is a goal. But I find that even something as tangible as building a house, the way that people understand the goal can be very different. And so I was wondering if that has a cultural element to it or not. Just like what Paul is asking, right? What is the variable things? And you were saying it's more of an individual thing and not necessarily a cultural thing. But even in terms of understanding the goal, do all people of one culture understand the goal in a certain way from a different group? Is there a cultural aspect to understanding the goal?
Definitely. But I'm not so sure. I think the personal perspective is what actually determines the final experience of the person. But my experience is also that people come in with some preconceived notions about what's going to happen through this collaboration, and that's definitely a cultural thing. that they're coming, like I don't know, like a US, somebody who's actually, I'll give you an example of a guy from Australia. He was working in the road transportation department in Australia, in Adelaide, and he has built so many roads. So he's got it he's an engineer, and he's just looking at it from that perspective. All right, we're going to make a road and everything. No, but when he got there, he realized that, a lot of it is just digging holes, with your own two hands, and that the rock is in Gujarat after the earthquake, and the ground is so hard that you only get blisters. You can't dig hardly at all. And another guy from France, he broke his pinky finger on the first day. And he had to decide whether he was going to keep lifting, these hollow blocks or just take it easy. And he kept doing it. As a guy named Tejas. So they kind of continued their participation while leaving their expectations aside. Mm-hmm. And then one thing I've noticed about people is that conclusion of that 2 weeks or 3 weeks, however long it is, that is the most important part for them, the closure. And that determines a lot of their experience. They come with certain expectations and ideas and fantasies about how it's going to go. But then at the end, just seeing that family occupy that house for the first time, and everybody crying, or the children looking so happy with their new rooms when they were living in a shack until then, that's that. Then they forget about all those ideas, and they just feel so satisfied that they could even come. So, and that part is not such a cultural thing. It's just your humanity that makes you realize that. That's what I feel.
Right. So, but how do you deal with dissent in that process then? So, for instance, if you break your pinky finger, you might also at some point say, or at the moment this happens, you're in pain, like, look, sorry, that's it. I'm going home. But so dissent is, of course, because people will be exhausted and tired.
Yeah.
So how is dissent now managed?
We don't push anybody. If they want to leave, we do everything we can to help them. It is challenging, some of these things being in a disaster area. In fact, I was I was sort of recalled from the ground zero in 2011 in the Japanese triple disaster. I went there with the idea that I wanted to stay there a long time and help, but I was the only person that had to go back because I had had a surgery earlier, and the board of directors said there's too much radiation, so you have to come back. I was a little sad about that, but I felt they have my best interest in mind. So a little bit of dissent in my mind, but all these things, whether you're the one that is forced to go home or you're the one who wants to go home, we have to be practical and rational. Right. So so Shanta, we looked now at your experience with also very concrete projects. We have examples, but what in your own career, you also went to officer training school. You said earlier, where they will train you in a very specific way to manage human collaboration, which might be actually rather different in how you have been doing it. So could you maybe highlight a little bit the differences? Yeah, I think I didn't explain it properly, perhaps, but I was accepted, but I ended up taking that job in Japan.
Okay. So you didn't really participate in that.
I've trained myself for it, but I ended up going to boot camp in an ashram.
Okay. Exactly. All right. So, but
actually, that was a really good lesson too, by the way.
Okay. Why was that a good lesson?
Because actually there was a lot of work. I mean, those days we didn't hire any workers to do the work, so we were the ones doing the concrete and carrying everything, and the girls would also do it too. So girls here means adult women. Not child labor.
I understand. Right.
Yeah. So and the idea is that we have to be flexible because the work is very strenuous, and if somebody needs to take a break, you just let them, because that's the way it is. And also sometimes the work changes. We'll take a big pile of wood and move it somewhere, and then you realize that no, it's not supposed to be there, but it's supposed to be somewhere else. And really, it's all about flexibility here, because things change in a setting like this.
Right. So to make it now a transition. So you did convert, right? And you joined an ashram, and you follow Amma. And
right.
In some sense, you could look at this dedication now to also a religious framework as also a way to structure human collaboration, right? There is, if you want, there are principles also in this religious commitment that structure the way in which people can collaborate. So could you elaborate on that a bit?
Very good point. Very good point. Yeah, I mean, if it were not for that background, that foundation that we are working upon, a lot of other things could be going on that would not necessarily be condemned in another setting. So I mean, it is foregone conclusion that we have to value certain things, and if someone just completely ignores some of those values, then it's pretty much clear that he's in the wrong, and then we can call him on it. So it would be things like patience, humility, forgiveness. I mean, typical spiritual qualities that all the faiths would probably would respect, and then also compassion. I think these qualities and many others also are willing to adjust to other people when needed. This is like I guess you would call it the lubrication for that machine of collaboration in this setting. And I find that really the concrete results are a tangible edifice that is built on the foundation of all these values, the intangibles, right. And without that foundation of the intangibles, I don't see how I could have done any of these things. I mean, I didn't do it. Everybody else did it.
No, but could we elaborate this a little bit? Because now we have the intangibles. The intangibles are values that are also grounded in a religious framework. Is there some structure to that? Because you listed a few, like generosity, humility, and so on. But is there some structure to that? Is there, let's say, an absolute ground zero value that it has to start with, and you build the others on top of that, for instance? Do you see some structure to them?
Yeah, it would have to be selflessness, I would say. And that comes from a deeper quality, or state, which would be love, unconditional love, which everybody wants, but typically they don't want to give it to people. So it's a challenge to evoke that emotion or that flow within ourselves, so that we can be selfless. Selflessness doesn't just come by chance, right? So that is probably the core principle in my mind.
And so the core principle is love, and from love comes selflessness.
Yep.
Right. But now these other values, like you mentioned, generosity, humility, how do you relate it to that?
Very good question. Okay. So to back up a little bit, in the Indian philosophy, the core principle is really non-duality. So it means that there's only one in this. It sounds kind of, hokey, but the idea is that if there is a divine power somewhere, that means it's everywhere, and we are that also. That's the concept. So that means that if there's no duality, then that means you, just like you value your own life, you should value everybody else's life exactly the same way, because of that oneness. So from that is where that real love comes, because it's not a dualistic love, it's a monistic one. And from that, the idea is that compassion arises, because just like if you cut your finger, you're going to treat that, whether it's the left hand or the right hand. So like that, whether it's your pain or somebody else's pain, you treat it the same way. That would be the compassion. And so from compassion, there you find is selflessness, because like the mother has compassion for the baby. The baby needs a lot of attention or has to stay up all night, the mother will stay up all night.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how the selflessness comes, from compassion. And then from selflessness really comes all the other qualities, I would say.
Right.
Humility, patience, and so on.
Mm-hmm. Now, but so that raises an interesting question for the discussion on collaboration, right? Because now in collaboration, we have to set goals.
Sure.
And now ego comes in, because you could argue that goals are on many occasions articulated through ego, because some ego is going to say this has to happen.
Right?
So if you dial down ego and we go to love and selflessness, we might pay a price in the goals that collaboration can achieve. So how do you see that potential contradiction?
It's where is the contradiction again, please? I didn't get. I was thinking you really hit the nail on the head, but then I didn't get the.
But that's why I said potential.
Potential. And
yeah,
what was the potential?
No, the point is the ego might shape goals. It's ego that says we need a village here and not there.
Yeah.
Right? But then to actually make that happen, we need collaboration. Now we're going to dial down ego.
Right. Well, I think one of the ways is to not participate in it. If someone else is having that problem, then, Amma has given an example like we can flow like water instead of trying to, if there's an obstacle, you don't have to try to break it and destroy it. You just flow around it. I'll give you an example. Again, I have so many stories from the housing project. We were unloading bricks from a truck, a lorry, and Kerala is the state where we've done a lot of it. And Kerala is a mostly communistic government, and the Communist Party. I mean, I don't know a whole lot about communism, but it doesn't seem to be like the original. It's just a lot of striking, and they will try to stop traffic and all that. So what they did, the local union came and told us that we have to pay them, even though we're unloading the bricks ourselves. They said, you're taking our money, so you have to pay us for it. And then we just didn't listen to them. We just kept unloading. But we didn't fight with them either. And we just, they had their goals, we had our goals, and we didn't ask them to help us or anything, but we kind of flowed around that issue so that we didn't have any conflict. It's not within the same collaboration, but if there are people who are having a temper tantrum or something during a project, there's always a way to flow around that and not try to scold them or control them or, sort of criticize them. Just let them calm down on their own.
Right.
Try not to react.
Go ahead. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I was saying we try not to react to that because it's a dead end. The ego level is a dead end for all of us.
Yeah, but so what I'm looking for here is whether there's a cost to the approach you take, right? Because in some sense, also the examples you give, if in some sense the collaborative process is a reactive one. There's a disaster somewhere. There's someone who needs to have a house. So the world is dictating the goals to you.
Yeah.
Right. And now you respond based on love and compassion. But I could say, but as humans, as humankind, we also need to set proactive goals that are purely future oriented, where we say, look, we're going to have ecological collapse. And if we don't take measures now, even though that's also a reactive one, but the more we project ourselves in the future, the more we have to become proactive. And then maybe to flow around the problems is limiting.
I think that maybe it's a slight clarification we can do here. I think the goal doesn't necessarily come from, which is I kind of typed out in the chat. The goal probably doesn't necessarily come from ego, but the the drive to achieve a goal probably comes, you have to have some ego to actually to work towards a goal. A goal can come from compassion. Somebody is homeless, they need a home. So then the goal is to build a home for a person. There's no ego necessarily in the goal. But for example, for you to be involved in that probably does have some levels of ego. I mean, this is what I would think. I don't know.
No, but Bhavani, the point is, I'm looking for the limitations of the definitions that we have on the table, right? And one potential limitation I see here is that goals are in some sense given to you by how the world is evolving. So then the question would be, is there really no role for ego in this whole process? And if there is a role for ego, how is that managed? Right? And so this is why, so I'm not excluding the possibility that goals can be set in different ways, or that actually ego has no role. But I want to really try to be as precise about it as we can be. Like if we talk about proactive goal setting, can the collective do that purely driven by selflessness?
Yes, I can say, is, if it's okay, were you going to say something more, Dr. Bhavani? No? Okay. So I can give you a brief failure story and an up and coming project. So just before Corona or COVID struck, I was trying to rally up a lot of support for us to grow our own vegetables in Chicago ashram, or the center there. And because we have a lot of land, and Amma has told us to grow our own food, we have to be self-sufficient. So I was getting everybody out there, and I was putting on my boots and, work clothes and going out there and trying to set an example. In retrospect, I think there was some ego of the leader role, the white knight who comes in and saves the day, which I don't like that attitude, but sometimes it may creep in every once in a while. And at that time, we were all fired up. But the problem was, at that time, I could have given a little more consideration, I would say, to the age of all the people and myself. And I actually hurt my knee because I overexerted in the process of trying to get everybody, motivated. And it was a little too much heavy on the leadership side. Could have been not so bold and pushy. So that one we couldn't harvest everything that we had put in the ground. It's very challenging. But the next project that we have coming up now is extremely full of a lot of foresight, which is a project about scientific research about the efficacy of a lot of herbs, which we've been growing there, different Western, Indian, Chinese, etc., and use those scientific findings to improve those. And we're going to grow them all there, and then they're going to be made into medicines, and then they will also be applied to wellness on site, and also getting those approved by the FDA in America or something like that. So this is a very far-sighted vision that has come up in recent days, and we're very happy that we are on that path, because it is not like a reactive one so much. It's an example of a rather novel and a forward-looking collaboration.
Right. Okay, so if you now look at the domain of collaboration and the way you shape it within the context of the processes where you're active, what do you see as the most critical challenges right now?
Yeah, I was thinking about that earlier, because the challenges tend to be, one would be like a myopic approach, looking at things from a short-term standpoint, not not really looking, like you're saying, for the future, and just running the collaboration in a way that produces some short-term success, but in a long term, it's going to affect the collaborators and the growth of that whole process. So that was an example of it. Then in that year when we had to take the Japanese students out in the middle of the night, that was definitely a myopic approach. That's one example. Another thing is with youth, an example from youth activities. In one place, I was with the coordinators for the youth summit that year. And it was a bunch of, I mean, I'm middle-aged now, so I'm not criticizing that, but it was a bunch of middle-aged leaders imposing their wisdom on the youth. And there was no empowerment going on there. And so I feel that disempowerment is a big challenge, because if you have if you're top heavy on the leadership, that can really discourage the motivation of the people. Other things are like I said, the white knight approach can be very destructive sometimes. It doesn't get people working together. The lone wolf approach also, I think, is dangerous too. Like holistic approach, I feel, is really critical for all these things. Looking at it for multiple layers of benefit, kind of like biomimicry, approaches, so where we can get multiple results from one action. So the opposite would be the atomistic approach, the non-holistic approach. We had a failure like that in Japan once a few years ago. When I was still living there, we wanted to have everybody grow a very potent Indian sacred herb called tulsi. And we got everybody excited about it, but we didn't really take into account the climate there, the climatological challenges there. And what happened was people who tried to grow them were sad when they died in the winter. And so it was not a very holistic approach.
Right.
Yeah. And one other point that comes to my mind is that, some people when they look at the collaborations, they analyze micro points too much. And they lose track of the macro vision. So the macrocosm is what gives meaning to the microcosm, really, in a way. Because if you're forgetting what the macro vision is, then there's no point in talking about all the details, because you're not going to achieve it. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that happens, I find, and then some people are really nitpicky about little things and they lose track of the macro vision.
Right.
Finger pointing is another problem that happened at the hospital site. Everybody was pointing, saying it was his fault, her fault, why everything is delayed, instead of trying to put together the what Microsoft project, the software. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I was trying to fill in 1,500 tasks in that for there's a 1,500 bed, 1,500 tasks there. And all I got initially was just finger pointing. Mm-hmm. And there's no of these predecessor relationships coming out. Nobody wants to talk about what the option, the real issues are. And so that took a long time to, hack my way through the jungle of that.
Right.
So these are a few examples in my experience.
Right. Well, that's a really good list. But with the finger pointing, how do you overcome finger pointing?
What I did, it was my first time at trying to do something like that. I said, that's fine. All right. He may be completely the worst person in the whole world, whatever it is. You please just tell me what you're trying to do. Mm-hmm. If it were a perfect world, what would you want to do? And then they start telling me, because they get excited, they kind of regain their vision. When they're focused on somebody else being the bad guy, they lose track of what their goal is, their end game, so to speak. And then they start when they can talk about their professional specialty and share what they really want to do, then I can note that down. And I say, how long will that take you? What has to happen before that? And what has to happen before that? And then I finally got everybody's information. And then they thought it was going to be ready at the end of the year. And I told them what you're telling me, all the data you gave me is told it's going to be not ready until next spring. And it wasn't ready until the spring.
Right.
But that we calculated it properly because they cooperated or collaborated.
Yeah. Okay. So now, did we learn anything from the COVID period we're in now? Collaboration?
Yeah, a lot of it. A lot of mistakes, of course. It seems to be arrogance for us to understand the modus operandi of COVID. We thought we knew what we were doing, and all that was a good lesson about human ego. Mm-hmm. And the fact that, what I learned is some of it is metaphysical, I guess you could say, is that I believe it's the total mass of all the coronavirus on the planet is like 1 gram or something, supposedly. And it's basically controlling everybody on the planet. Mm-hmm. That little 1 gram of something. And it shows how powerful subtle things are. You could take a huge bomb and you still wouldn't stop the whole world. But something very subtle can be very powerful. That's one thing about life in general.
Did we lose him?
Hopefully he will come back.
Yeah.
But why don't you ask him about this definition of ego or from Amo?
Yeah, no, it actually goes well with his Tulsi story also. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I could. I also didn't know how much time we have.
Yeah, that's up to Shanta, right? But it looks like he's frozen in time now, so we have forever.
But it's interesting what he was talking about in terms of. Let me text him on WhatsApp. What he was talking about in terms of the thing about putting that, it's like reorientation towards your goal that help people come back. Mm-hmm. So this keeps on coming up.
Yeah.
Does collaboration never happen without a goal, Paul?
I think it's absolutely at the heart of it. There must be a common goal.
Right. It cannot happen without it, right? I'm just wondering, have you ever come across even one he just texted me. One example where it happens without a goal?
No, I don't think we would speak of collaboration in that case. Then it can be cooperative.
He's trying to join Mac again. Maybe you have to let him in.
Yeah, but I don't see him yet. I'm ready to click the button, but he has to appear first.
Asking to restart soon.
Mm-hmm. No problem.
How much of collaboration also depends on respect and just making small changes to what your worldview is, and accommodate somebody else's worldview. Mm-hmm. If you are trying to accomplish something as opposed to somebody else that you're trying to bring on board.
I think that's a very essential aspect of actually converging, right?
Sorry.
Yeah, Shanta, I'm sorry.
No, my fault, I think.
But I understand you try to give us a signal like, okay, this has been enough. So.
No. Oh, no, I can talk about this all night. Don't worry.
Okay, great. So now look, we will not hold you up much longer. But so then a more sort of open question here is also: do you believe humanity on this planet will ever be able to establish sustainable collaboration?
I'm a bit of an oddball on that. I think if I speak my mind freely, I feel that if we want nature to collaborate with us, we have to collaborate with her.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, it seems to me that what's happening now in the world is a sort of a reaction from nature teaching us how to rectify our course, to, because we're not on a wonderful course at this point. Doesn't seem like it's a world over. We could be doing a lot better. And so Mother Nature seems to be leading us in that way. So if we don't figure it out ourselves, I have confidence that, Mother Nature, being our mother, will guide us the right way and show us where we really should be focusing, like how people felt early on in the now everybody's kind of tired, but they learned a lot early on, like how you can have a good life and a fulfilled life and you can have contentment even amidst this if you just change your perception. So I think we're going to be, if we don't create sustainable, or if we don't achieve sustainable collaboration now, we can expect more life lessons from Mother Nature, and as the result of our own doings as well. So when we start learning from those experiences, I think we'll be on the way to a sustainable collaboration.
Are you optimistic that we will be able to learn from those lessons?
Yes.
Okay.
Because I mean, I see nature as my mother, so I think the mother knows what the child needs, and the mother will keep giving those lessons until the child really gets it. She's very patient also.
But that in your answer, a lot of suffering also is implied then.
It could be. It's up to us how much suffering has to be experienced.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. But so, Bhavani, do you have another question or observation to share? Because then I will move to our last question.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Are you sure?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay.
Fine.
So Shanta, but if you could change one thing in humans to make them better collaborators and also in some sense save their own existence on this planet and save the planet, what's the one thing you would change?
In one of the scriptures of India, there is a saying that by nature the mind is facing outwards. I mean, you could probably call it extrovert. Is that what we say in English? I don't propose to rewrite the whole, story about man, and humans. But I think it would be, if we want to have sustainable collaboration and if we want to have a better world, then a little more self-reflection built into the human being would go a long ways.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of our failures come from the lack of self-reflection.
Right. Swami Shantamritananda Puri, thank you very much for this conversation.
Thank you so much for being patient with me with all my wild ideas.
No, but what's really interesting and puzzles me tremendously is this juxtaposition of the tangibles and the intangibles, right? Because it also means, in some sense, in your model of collaboration, you really critically build on the ability of the mind, right? This extrovert mind to impose an interpretation on reality, right? To give meaning and value to the tangibles. That building a house actually stands for something much more profound. So how do we? Where does that ability come from? Is that learned or is that just given? Also, the idea of the one, right? To identify with the one, which goes through the history of ideas from the old traditions till now.
Yeah.
Where is this coming from?
I think it is innate. I mean, I'm, that's my field of life. I'm in that already, so it's not fair to say that. But my experience also confirms it in many ways. I mean, it's really, I don't know how to explain it. It's beyond words when you're finished with a project like that, and you've got the person who flew thousands of miles just to do something that was very difficult to help somebody. And then, when they're saying farewell, the tears are so profound. And I can just remember one example that what I couldn't stop crying myself. There was the recipient of the house, and there was a Japanese girl who was the leader of one of the groups, and she was representing her group saying farewell. They sang a Japanese song to that people, like a very sort of sad song, like saying goodbye. It's a traditional Japanese song, and then just hearing the tune and the lyrics, even though they couldn't understand what they meant, the woman started crying. Something touched her, and the Japanese woman who was standing in front of her, she took that woman's. They both had like a towel around their neck, like you do in hot places when you're working. And she took that woman's towel and she started wiping her eyes. They're wiping the tears from her eyes. And when she started doing that, the woman who was wiping her tears started crying. Mm-hmm. And then the woman who was crying took her towel and wiped her tears, and then I started crying, but nobody wiped my tears. Mm-hmm. But I mean, I'll never forget that. Mm-hmm. Every time I remember it, I just get that emotion. And there's no reason why I should. It's just part of our humanity. Mm. And the feeling of, and there was another guy on that same year. He was a karate master, really real tough guy, and he was kind of showing off his strength and everything. And I was looking at him every day when I would go to his site. And I was like, when is this guy going to just kind of be a real human being, And it was the last day. His house was, it was a widow named Lakshmi. She is maybe almost 70. And her house, if you could call it that, if you just would to tap it, it would fall over. I can show you a photo. It's really sad. And then somehow he got so attached to this woman because every time they would come in the morning, she didn't have anything to offer them. But she would run around, well, as much as a 70-year-old lady can. She was scurrying around the neighborhood to gather water, a little bit of coffee grounds and, sugar, so she could serve them some, what we call, well, in English would be black coffee. She would make that for them and give it to them. And they knew that she didn't have anything, but she was going around and getting it from everybody every day. And so he got so attached to her. When we were saying goodbye, he just completely collapsed. And he was whimpering like a dog, like a little baby. And his friends had to pick him up. He was so, emotional. Mm-hmm. And so if someone like that can experience some, those feelings of the heart, I think anybody can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but these are really meaningful examples because it means that the wish of humans, the drive, the unconscious drive to bond with other humans.
Yeah,
it's also this love dimension you mentioned. You mentioned earlier is really then the foundation that we also collaborate and accept each other's idiosyncrasies.
Yeah, there's no other way. I mean, the best example that we can really get is that of a mother and a child, because the baby is inside of her, it is oneness really. But then somehow duality takes place, the baby comes out and then it's duality, but still for the mother, it's still part of her emotionally, right? So if we could all feel that way about everybody, think how different that the world would be.
Right. But are you implying that if you want cultural development and economic development is sort of pulling us away from this intrinsic more open-minded, love-oriented, selfless, collaborative state?
I don't think it necessarily has to be that way, because I don't, propose to be a historian, but there are traditions, and there are all these historical accounts of better times in the old days. I like to feel that human beings were a little more humane in the old ancient times, not like 500 years, like thousands of years ago. And I think every country has their version of that sort of the golden years of that country. And I think that in those days, even though the technology was not the same that we had, they had their own version of that, and they were growing and they were prospering, and they weren't hurting other people. Of course, it changed at one point and it became darker at times. But I still believe that is possible. It is possible to advance as a country, as a society, and as a people without the negative side effects. Mm-hmm. And the key to that is going to be, from a administrative standpoint, it would be holism, which is a holistic perspective, and then philosophically, it's oneness.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much. That was extremely insightful. Hi, you listened to one of our podcasts in the series on collaboration, produced by the Instrument Forum and the Convergent Science Network. You can find more episodes on our website.